thoughts on the yogic positive attitudes, because it's relatively shorter, and then move to the one on yogic principles, right? So, right. So, if you can see the screen, the way the primary idea is that this is one of the sutras of Patanjali Yoga Sutra, which talks about how one would attain a peaceful mind, depending on what your state and your people around you state of mind is. So he describes a set of 4 locks that people often come with. So there are happy people called sukha, unhappy people dukkha, who are maybe having some unhappiness in their life. There are people who are virtuous, punya, and there are those who are not so very virtuous, who are apunya. Now, we are surrounded by people who fall under each of these categories. We ourselves fall under one of these 4 categories, right? Now, how does one, still stay calm with a calm mind when you are with people who belong in one or more of these categories, right? Including yourself. So he says there's a key, and the keys are these 4 behaviors. So he calls these positive attitudes. So he says, and it's to be paired. So maitri, which is friendliness or loving kindness, should be paired with happy people. So when you meet happy people, the idea is not to stay calm. Many people might find a little bit of envy or jealousy that would come in when you see people who are very happy. But to feel positive and friendly, that would be the attitude that you would need to have as key to stay calm when you are around or surrounded by happy people. Similarly, when you are surrounded by people who are very sad, the idea is to feel not pity, not even, there are people who might even feel happy, I'm not sure, but the idea is not to feel even pity, but to feel what is called compassion, right, for people, and to, because we might be in that position someday. Life is a cycle, so that is one of the attitudes that karuna goes with dukkha. And finally, the last 2, which is punya and apunya. So the virtuous people, once again, to just feel delight and try, called mudita, and try to imbibe some of the qualities of the virtuous people, to not feel jealousy or even wonder how they are, but to actually try to imbibe it and be delighted in their company. And finally, the not so virtuous people, we obviously we cannot avoid people like this, nor and in many cases we might need to be around people who may not necessarily agree with our own value systems, or and I'm sure that there are tons of people who actually live day in and day out in such a situation. So how would one deal with such people? Would be with a little bit of disregard or indifference, which is called upeksha. And this is an important topic, because in the tests, often this comes as a question, and it's a very straightforward question. They'll either ask you what are the 4 qualities, or they'll also ask you to be able to pair it up. So while this verse goes in some way where you have to I should have kept the verse, but in the absence of which all these words are in some sense a part of the verse. Maitri and Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha, to be used for Sukha, Dukkha, Punya and Apunya people. So this is something that I think those of you who are looking to attend the exam should surely at least keep in mind, right? It's quite logical. If you can even, try to find some mnemonic, or I'm sure the meanings are very clear. Maitri is often, friendliness. It's in many languages that comes up. Karuna also. Mudita and Upeksha alone, if it's tough for different people from different locations, perhaps it's good to find some mnemonic to remember, and also remember the order. So this is something that we that comes up, or surely would come up. So please do look at it. With this, I'll just move to the principles of yoga. Is that okay? Right. If there's anything that you have, do ask, please. But I'm moving on. So we're going to the topic 1.4 called Principles of Yoga. In some sense, it's an introduction. There is an introduction to Yoga, which in some sense talks about the underlying, first principles of yoga, based on which many of the other topics are built upon. So how does yoga view, or how does this help us view the body, the world, the universe, and our relationship with it, right? So this is what is covered in this principles of yoga, and it is really the foundations over which many of the other topics are drawn upon. So to that extent, it's a nice and interesting topic that one who is interested in yoga and philosophy and even physics and thoughts about the universe, matter, philosophy would be interested in looking at. So typically, I can from yes, hello.
Hello, that Sharitraya, can I know something about Sharitraya?
Yes, yes. It'll be coming up soon. Shall I start with that, or uh, shall I go to that first?
Yes, Sharitraya.
Okay. So, in some sense, this is uh, Shariratraya is about the three types of bodies of our that we look at. So Sharira is body, right, and it's classified into three types. What is called the Sthula Sharira, which is the gross body. You also might have come across this for Sthula Vyayam, right? And Sthula, in some sense, is just gross physical. It's just matter. So anything that's at the outermost level in terms of physically real and visible and seen and touchable, all matter falls under the gross physical level, right? And gross uh, body. There is the next level, which is one level inside, which is called the subtle body, not so easy to see. It's called Sukshma Sharira. And the third one is called the causal body or the Karana Sharira, right? Sometimes for the exam, they might ask you how does it map to the koshas. So it is also important to understand koshas, but which we will do pancha koshas. Now the gross body is like we discussed. It's called a sthula sharira, and you can think of it as any matter, including matter like the earth and other materials, fire, space, air, and water. And on our bodies itself, it is really the things that we can see and look at, right, when we see another human body. So so that is what it has. But what is interesting about it is it's we all know it's temporary in nature, and it undergoes six modifications. So, and uh, those are uh, the six modifications would be this, right? So it goes in, it comes into existence, and then is born. It undergoes growth and maturity, decay, and death. So sometimes this is another question asked, perhaps at level 2 maybe. What are the modifications that the gross body or sthula sharira undergoes? So anything that undergoes these levels would be called a gross body. And for the subtle body or sukshma sharira, subtle body is also called, I think, by there's another name, astral body, right? If I'm correct. So it's called sukshma sharira in the Sanskrit terms, and it has these 17 elements. The five senses called the Gyanendriya, the Karmendriya, which is the five actions, or uh, bodies that help us act, and we will see that too. And the five pranas or breath, the mind and the intellect, manaha and buddhi, which manaha and buddhi are also going to come up in another part of our discussion today, which is a part of the inner work, inner mind. So, but all of these constitute the subtle body, which is in some sense not what is physically visible or seen, but what is inside or manifested inside within. And finally, what is not even visible, or there is no way to even talk about it. It's something that is a construct of discussion. It's really called the causal body or Karana Sharira, which is really supposed to be the seed of both the bodies that we were talking about, the gross and subtle. It's what causes the two to form. It's like a seed, and it's also the beginning. It's the start of avidya, which is uh, the fact that we are the avidya, meaning the fact that we are different from the one, right? The consciousness, that the germ and the starting point is the causal body. It also results in the other two bodies, which is the gross body and the subtle body, and our attachment to life and to that those forms. So these are in some sense the three bodies or three sharira. And from the exam perspective, perhaps it will also be good to see where what it maps to in terms of the pancha koshas.
Yeah, I agree. I think from exam perspective, these are the very, very important topics. Huh? Definitely, some questions will come on this for L1 as well as for L2.
Correct. At least the names. Sometimes they will ask you the origins, but koshas and trigunas will are even more important than, I think, the shariras, three shariras. So I'll quickly go through the the order in which we had planned for. So in some sense, the yeah, you might like to look at this. So from the beginning, there was in the Sankhya philosophy, there are two aspects called the Purusha and the Prakriti. One is supposed to be pure consciousness or existence, and Prakriti is supposed to be matter or action or form. And both, in some sense, when both manifest themselves, they create what is called the cosmic intelligent or the Mahad. And from there, the origin of ahamkar, the ego within us, the sense of being, right? I am in me, that gets originated. And within us, each of us has what is called, or even the world, anything in the world will have three qualities called sattva, rajas, and tamas. And each of those qualities has certain properties, especially when it comes to us as individuals, but it's also applicable to any matter or anything, right? Anything in the world. Now, sattva has in some sattva, rajas, and tamas. You will typically see these three classifications. So the sattva quality is stability, a state of stability, and in that you would see five senses of the sensory faculty, the motor organs, and the mind. And the tamas is what is going to have the the elements of ether, earth, fire, air, and water, which also correspond to this is something that you might want to remember, and we might actually share a table. You might already have seen the table in that visual guide that is there by Dhananjay. That table is interesting because it has the mapping of all of these in one visual view. It'll be nice to keep it and look at it. But for my own mnemonic, this is what I had tried to see, the sound, right? The sound is there in space, correct? You can travel through space, so I always associate sound with akash or space or ether. Similarly, touch, which is something that you can feel in your skin. You can feel the air, right? Even if you just close your eyes, as the fan rotates, you can feel the air in your skin. So imagine that air and touch are associated traits. Similarly, sight, what we see, which is a sensory perception of sight, that is associated with fire, which is light, right? Fire, which gives energy and light. So you can see it and imagine that that is corresponding to each other. This is more a mnemonic. It is not the reason why they are associated. I do not know the reason why they're associated with each other. If Dhananjay or anyone else knows, do let me know. But I'm just giving you a mnemonic to help you associate the two. Similarly, taste, you can, in your tongue, you can, there is obviously saliva, so imagine it's water. And smell, you can smell the earth, right? Close your eyes and smell the earth. Imagine the fresh smell of earth in early monsoon, onset of monsoon. So these are related. Just a second. Just a second. Sorry. Sorry for the interruption. So once, these are things that will be good for you to keep in mind, if possible, to at least know there are five karmendriyas, five jnanendriyas, five karmendriyas, or the organs of action, right? The organs of action corresponds to mouth, which helps you eat, speak, etc. Right? So those are the actions, and to make sound. Similarly, hands and feet. Hands to hold, feet to move, reproductive organs and excretory organs. These are the organs of action, and whereas the input, what we get, is the sensory faculty, which is, I think, known to everybody: the ears, the skin for the sense of touch, eyes to see, tongue to taste, and nose to smell. So you can see they have a correspondence with this side also. So there is a very nice tabular view which has all of these matched with each other, which we can share with you later. But just want to let you know that all matter that manifests in the universe has this small bit of consciousness, which also has these qualities in some proportion: sattva, rajas, and tamas. That is the assumption, underlying assumption. And the fact that sattva is an uh, organic means it is a stable state, whereas in inorganic means it is in a inert state. So these are some of the discussions or topics in Sankhya philosophy. The reason why we talk about it is because it's in something underlying many of these principles underlie all the other uh, topics that we are learning, right? You have to assume that these are first principles. Once you agree with this or believe in this, then everything else starts making sense, right? So one very interesting way in which you can look at this is, uh, there is raw information coming in as input to each of our sensory faculty, five sensory faculty, and all of these have a certain set of elements or tanmatras that help you, the mind or the seer, process this information. And based on this information, your ego, who is the modifier, helps you express your personality, which includes, three different qualities, which is called three gunas, which is the sattva quality, rajas quality, and tamas quality. Now I'm moving into the human self, not just all matter in the universe, but when we were talking in the earlier slide, it was about all matter in the universe. But now the focus is on the self, the human mind, or us for now, right? So, and in some sense, we get, having processed the information, we express ourselves in various forms, and it affects our personality. And the three gunas are the sattva, rajas, and tamas. And sattva corresponds to typically harmony, stability, happiness, positive personality. Rajas is really about action and action oriented, passionate, self centered, right? People who are go getters, they call them A type personalities in other Western psychology and psychological analysis. And tamas is a state of, inertia, also chaos, disorder, but doesn't always, it's not always that it is a negative quality. All of us have a combination of all of these, and all of this is required in various proportions and in different situations. So nothing, one couldn't do without any of these. But the idea is that we would want to move towards a state where we are, at least the goal of yoga is to move towards a state where we are gunatit. We are not troubled by any of these qualities, which is in some sense being free from this layer, right? And moving up. So this is the way we interpret it. So this is about the sattva, rajas, and tamas, which is three gunas. and it comes up in many places, including the Upanishads and also the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita talks at great length about the Trigunas. And Panchakoshas, another important topic from the exam perspective, is coming from Taittiriya Upanishad. Please do either take a note of it or mentally try to remember it, because it can get asked. So, and Panchakoshas are in some sense about our self, right? And the various layers or sheaths. Kosha itself means it's like a jacket of ourselves. So we have a physical body, but there are other layers too, or other sheaths too. So, and those layers are, there are 5 such layers, which is why it's called Panchakosha. So the innermost layer, which is directly, part of our physical self, which is what is visible or is analyzed by science, is called the physical body. It consists of tissues, cells. It's all matter that gets decayed, old, and dies, right? So all of it is the Annamaya Kosha. And Annamaya is really the food. Anna we all know is food, right? So Annamaya Kosha is that physical layer. And then going one layer outside is called the breath or the Pranamaya layer, the energy field. So which recognizes the existence of an energy field, chakras, nadis around in our body. So, which is not something in the realm of science, but it's surely in the realm of yoga, right? So, the Pranamaya Kosha has many of these in their assumptions, and while we are not able to yet physically see it, or we can assume that we assume that this exists, energy field exists. A lot of the this becomes a fundamental principle based on which rest of yoga also follows, because a lot of yoga is aiming, not just at the physical layer, right? It goes through all of these layers. So that's where this topic becomes very important. There are many things that focus only on this layer, energy field, right? The prana. And going one level beyond, it is the manomaya kosha, the area of the mind, right? Which is what helps us feel, think, express whatever happens in our emotional state. So it's about emotions. So we are now going further inside, meaning inside our brain, but in terms of another layer, which is called the Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is really wisdom. It's also called intuition. Many people believe that this is the thing that helps you discriminate, the viveka that you require, right, to solve your day-to-day problems or even stay sane, often comes from this layer, which is the higher mind, that is unperturbed by things in the emotional state or in the manonmaya state. So it helps you, and it also contains a lot of what comes to you from, your past birth, your other karmas, right? I think it's the prarabdha karma. I can't recollect whether it's that or the one that comes from the accumulated karma. If somebody knows, do share. Is it the prarabdha karma? Anyway, so a lot of what exists in the Vijnanamaya Kosha can come from as accumulated wisdom from earlier births. It's also what is that guides you. They call it the inner conscience or voice. It also is called intuition, and it
I
helps.
think that is Sanchit Karma.
Sanchita karma. Okay, right. Thank you. Thanks. That is the one. So this is where at that layer, a lot of the things that go into that layer are the part of your mind that helps you decide the right things, which are not very, uh, you know, it comes from an inner self. You simply, there are many people who say, no, I simply know that this was the right decision. The intuition, those are things that are part of the Vijnanamaya Kosha, and often they are what is called the higher mind. And finally, the state of ultimate bliss, which is the being, or when you're one with the true self or nature, that is called the Anandamaya Kosha, because the name itself says Anandamaya, right? So that is what it is. And yeah, once again, as you can see, once again it's highlighted that it's a part of Taittiriya Upanishad, so it's very important to remember this as well. So these are the 5 sheets and the very important topic. Surely there'll be some questions from this particular topic. Sometimes they may ask you, as I mentioned earlier, how it maps to the three shariras or the three shariras. Right, and you might also, the reason why this is very fundamental is that it will help you in some sense also understand many of the yogic, even the Ashtanga yoga as set of 8 steps, but also every single asana also that you learn could be directed at various aspects. Asanas could also be directed the physical layer, annamaya layer, and also the pranamaya layer, right? Similarly, pranayama may be directed at this layer, the pranamaya layer, but also help you with this, right? So in some sense, it serves as a guide for a lot of, interpreting a lot of what you will read even in yoga as the Ashtanga yoga of, say, Patanjali, or even the other types of yoga described by other yogis. So I think we are done with all of this. Yeah. Okay. Another two topics really are the Antakarna Chatushtaya, which is about the mind. Antakarna itself means antar, right? Antaha means inside. Inside our mind, how do we classify the states of our mind, or our mind? You have 4 parts of the mind. One is just what is called chitti, which is chitta, which is called the storehouse of memory. Not to be confused by the chitti of Yoga Sutra, chitta vritti nirodha. It's slightly, in this context, in the context of Antakarna Chatushtaya, it means memories, right? The smriti in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. But in Antakarna Chatushtaya, chitta means memory, and ahankara is the sense inside you that knows that it is you. So the sense of self is called the ahankara. The buddhi is the more the manas is more the emotional part of your mind, and the buddhi is more the viveka, the one that will help you discriminate. So these are the 4 layers of your mind, and this is the classification, and it also corresponds to actually 3 avasthas, avastha traya, 3 states of your consciousness, which comes from the Mandukya Upanishad, which is described in the Mandukya Upanishad. So the 3 states of your consciousness could be in the Jagrita state, or being awake, the dream state, which is Swapna, and also the deep sleep, which is beyond your REM sleep. It's called deep sleep even in science, Sushupti state, right? So each of these states has a lot more that you could learn about. One could learn about. It's deep, but for now, I think just the name should be sufficient, in the fact that there are 3 such states. And when you go beyond this, and you're the state of just the absolute consciousness, which is actually the 4th state, it's called Turiya. It's beyond any of these 3 states of the mind or the consciousness. So in some sense, these are the topics that are in some sense fundamental to many of the other things that one learns in yoga. So, or at least these are what are assumed as a given. So when Patanjali Yoga Sutra was written, these were part of the first principles about how people thought of the mind, the body, the world, and the universe. So given that, this is a topic called yoga, first principles, yoga's principles of yoga. So I think we've covered all of this, and we are also, I think, 10